So greetings, my name is Michael Mejia. I am the director of the creative writing program here at the U. And just want to say thank you all for coming out tonight to help celebrate our colleagues Lance Olsen and Melanie Rae Thon. Before we get started, on behalf of the program, I'd like to acknowledge that the land upon which the university is located and which is named for the Ute tribe is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. I'd also like to thank the University of Utah's English Department and Office of the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs for their support of our annual Guest Writer Series. The Writer Series also receives funding from Salt Lake County Zoo Arts and Parks and Utah Humanities, which empowers groups and individuals to improve their communities through active engagement in the humanities. The series is supported as well, in part, by Utah Arts and Museums, with funding from the state of Utah and the National Endowment of the Arts. And finally, thanks to Sadie Hoagland and Aaron Olanek for all the work that they've done to organize this gathering, and to Weller Bookworks for providing copies for sale of our readers' books tonight. Due to time constraints, this intro, which is already too long, must remain brief. I'll provide bios for all our readers, and then I will get out of the way. So we're here, as you know, to celebrate Lance Olsen and Melanie Rae Thon, beloved colleagues both, who have recently retired. Melanie in 2020, after 20 years at the U, and Lance in 2023, after 16 years. Together, they have published tons of astonishing and innovative books. Among the most recent for Lance, Always Crashing in the Same Car, his luminous exploration of the late life of an eternal David Bowie. And for Melanie, As If Fire Could Hide Us, a song of pain, praise, and ecstatic consciousness across all states of being. But it's not solely for their incredibly accomplished careers as writers that we're gathered here tonight. We are truly delighted that Lance and Melanie will be joined at this podium by 6 representatives of the hundreds of graduate students they worked with over their 2 decades of service to the program. It's impossible to overstate the tremendous impact Lance and Melanie have had in shaping the U's creative writing program in the 21st century, both in terms of its curriculum and its ethos. Very different writers with different personalities and different teaching styles, they are nevertheless aesthetically harmonious, as well as loving friends to each other, wise colleagues, and committed mentors. Their differences, as well as their equally deep attention to students, produced a potent and very palpable energy in this program, which is, thankfully, being carried forward in their own ways in the writing and teaching of the students they worked with. For my part, I'm incredibly grateful for the role you both played in my career here, and for so many years, so many good years as your colleague and your continued friendship. As a program, our gift of thanks to you tonight is appropriately the words of your students. Robert Glick is an associate editor at Seneca Review and an associate professor, program director of English at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where he teaches creative writing and digital literature. His first book, Two Californias, was published by C&R Press in 2019. His stories have appeared in the Normal School, Denver Quarterly, Black Warrior Review, and the Gettysburg Review. Excerpts from his recently completed novel, The Asterisms, were the winning submissions for the Summer Literary Seminars and the Ohio Review National Fiction Prizes. He lives in Rochester, New York, with his partner Anne, their border collie Toby, and their baby Evan. Sadie Hoagland is the author of Strange Children, May 18, 2021, Red Hen Press, and American Grief in 4 Stages, November 1, 2019, West Virginia University Press, which earned a starred review from Kirkus Reviews. Her second novel, Circle of Animals, will be published in 2024 by Red Hen Press. Her work has been published in Salon, Necessary Fiction, South Dakota Review, Passages North, 5 Points, and elsewhere. She currently coordinates the Guest Writer Series at the University of Utah. Jessica Alexander's novella, None of This is an Invitation, co-written with Katie Jean Schinkel, arrived from Astroville Press in summer 2023. Her story collection, Dear Enemy, was the winning manuscript in the 2016 Subito Prose Contest, as judged by Sela Satterstrom. Her collaborative project, That Woman Could Be You, came out with BlazeVox in April 2022. Her fiction has been published in journals such as Fence, Black Boy Review, Pank, Denver Quarterly, The Collagist, and Diagram. She lives in Louisiana, where she teaches creative writing at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Molly Gaudry is founder of LitPub and the author of Desire, a haunting sequel to We Take Me Apart, which was a finalist for the Asian American Literary Award and shortlisted for the PEN Osterweil. She teaches at Stony Brook University and the Yale Writers Workshop. Joe Sacksteder is the author of the short story collection Makeshift, Saraband, and the novel Driftless Quintet, Schaffner Press. His album of audio collages, Fugitive Traces, is available from Punctum Books. Recent work has appeared in Michigan Quarterly Review, Diagram, The Offing, and West Branch, and his criticism has been featured in the Atlantic's Culture Roundup. He's an assistant professor of English and creative writing at Sweetbriar College, and his novel Hack House is forthcoming from Astrophil Press in 2024. Eric Blix is an assistant professor of English at Valdosta State University in Valdosta, Georgia. He is the author of 2 books, a story collection called Physically Alarming Men, Stephen F. Austin, and a novel called The Prodigious Earth, Erratum. With no further ado, please welcome to the podium Robert Glick.
Hi, everyone. Okay, first I'm finding you so I can cry in the other direction. Then I will put my glasses on. Dear all, thank you so much for coming to this wonderful event to celebrate my mentors, Lance Olsen and Melanie Rae Thon. Thank you to everyone at the U for putting this together, and to all the readers. I can't even tell you how nice it is to just see everybody here. It's great to be back. For me, it's a very special, ludicrously rare opportunity to return to Salt Lake to celebrate 2 people who are instrumental in shaping me, both as a writer and as a person. 2 people whom I cherish, whom I still turn to for advice and support, who helped me figure out what kinds of engagements and intensities were possible with this messy language we love. I won't go into detail, but simply say thank you, thank you, thank you. I have 2 tiny excerpts of their work, one from each, that run the mesmerizing gamut of, as Lance would say, possibility spaces of writing. This one, from Lance, full of repetition and association and strangeness, from Lance's novel, Dream Lives of Debris. What I am telling you, I want to say, is a love story. Let us call what I am telling you a love story. Let us say my eyes are the color of polished onyx. Let us say my skin is so thin you can see lavender flatworms quivering beneath it like quick little ideas. And sometimes I wake alarmed from a dreamless sleep din, whirled all black rabbit sniffs among my ribs, wondering if everyone has finally forgotten me. It is not unimaginable, and it is. I have borrowed eyes, borrowed ears, borrowed tongue. How long has it been since mommy rocked her little duration? Since the eunuch priests loosed one of their pigs ruffling with sacrificial ribbons to snort through my heart? Since they hid an amphora teeming with lily tastes, rose tastes, the taste's interesting injuries, a new toy for me to treasure out? And this little excerpt from Melanie, the first story of hers, Nobody's Daughters, from her early collection, First Body, the first story of hers that I had ever read and wound up teaching, which taught me how you could be emotionally gutting, direct, and lyric at the same time. I remember running, the immaculate cold, the air in me, my lungs hard. I remember thinking, I'm alive, a miracle anyone was. I wondered who had chosen me. I remember trying to list all the decent things I'd ever done. I remember walking till it was light, knowing if I slept, I'd freeze. I never wanted so much not to die. I made promises, I suppose. In the morning, I walked across a bridge, saw the river frozen along the edges, scrambled down. I glided out on it. I walked on water. The snowflakes kept getting bigger and bigger, butterflies that fell apart when they hit the ground, but the sky was mostly clear and there was sun. As for my own writing, I'm just going to read an early section of my just completed novel, The Asterisms. While it's got a bunch of narrators, this comes from the teenage boy, Russell. Content warning for references to a miscarriage. Sometimes the day after Mom's miscarriage, an English teacher with chin-only stubble interrupts class to tell you he is dying. There were so many reasons not to be anywhere. I, aka Dr. Watermelon, convened everyone at the abandoned house I had stumbled on the day before, which I had named the Sketch House on account of the Etch-a-Sketch I had found in a toy chest. My best buddy Filbert plopped down on the oyster chair, which made the air above him cloud up with dust mites and dried skin. Finders keepers, he said. Fraternal twins Rob and Ron Crandall each kept one eye perched on the doorless front door. They thought the sketch house was a portal to a terrifying underworld domain, as if the kitchen linoleum had been responsible for mawing open and swallowing its former occupants. Ron suggested that we get sizzled on the Freon from the fridge. It doesn't count as sin, he said. Rob agreed. We were repurposers. Nope, Filbert said. Highly toxic. We flicked matches at the shelves, expecting sulfur, anticipating cartwheels of burn through the air. Filbert, nicknamed for the teratoma lodged like a moon above his kidney, had a talent for fire. His flame flew through the air and landed on my crotch. I didn't move. All I could do was numbly observe warmth on my jeans. Yesterday, everything started normal, at least until school, when I walked in the back door and immediately knew that something was wrong. Jess, my sister, twirled back and forth on a bar stool. Her sniffle wasn't a cold kind of sniffle. Dad was red-eyed. Absently, he scratched a new cleft into his chin with a ginger ale bottle cap. Mom walked down the stairs, clutchy on the handrail, wearing her hospital intake bracelet, trying not to cry. Your mother lost the baby, Dad told me. I slung my backpack to the soapstone island between the kitchen and dining room. Is she okay? She's fine, Dad said. Thank goodness. Whatever fine is, Mom said. Can someone make me some broccoli? For some reason, I want a bite of broccoli. I don't know where you keep the steamer, Dad said. Next to my backpack lay a box of unsharpened pencils, which, when I looked at Jess, she studiously took out so that she could focus on poking them through her ratty hair. She had read on the internet that shampoo was bad, so she had been washing and conditioning with a concoction of apple cider, vinegar, and baking soda. Often she smelled like a salad. I'll do it, I said to Mom. Blanched, please. I took the knife from the magnetic rack, put water in the pot. The mop was out, leaning against the counter. Dad put his arm tightly around Mom. Not how we planned it, she said. Obviously, muttered Jess. I glared at her. We all sat there, this house so quiet, until the pot bubbled. Mom took her broccoli and trudged back upstairs. I went to lift weights. Dad offered to give me a spot. I said no. I didn't want to see how, when I was at the bench press, his whiskers looked like graphics of air pressure patterns, and the edges above his nostrils had tiny pink cracks of capillaries. I refused to rest between sets. I lifted huge. Sometimes you feel guilty for giving the fetus a name, for naming him Sprocket, and even more guilty for wanting to retire that name, in the same way that the Royals retired George Brett's beloved number 5. That evening, once Dad closed their bedroom door, I drove my jalopy without destination, desperate for that weird feeling of freedom you get when the suburbs spread thin, give way onto fields. I crossed west into Kansas. I let the drone of wind replace thought. What finally stopped me was the dry-docked boat, named Depth of Field, propped on sawhorses next to the derelict house. I decided to explore. The front door had been ripped off its hinges and turned into a welcome mat. I hit the lights, expecting flies on a desiccated body, a pentagram in red spray paint, bathtubs full of crank. No. Only some exposed plumbing, a smell of cow patties, the particular mold of citrus. Whoever had lived here had left quickly or packed lightly. Throw pillows, a fan of vacuum cleaner bags on the ground. Afraid of bed bugs, I laid down a piece of cardboard before I laid down on the couch. I was worn out, intensely so. I thought a long time about that wrong word, lost. We lost the baby, Dad had said, as if it was temporarily missing, like keys or wallet. I didn't think I would sleep. When I did, I dreamed the last dream I would remember for months. Our rattlesnake terrier, which is what I called our feisty mutt, Brick, kept puking up gelatinous, half-digested tadpoles. They didn't die, though. To my great relief, they grew and grew, suddenly as big as flapjacks and cadmium red, all blurping safely in craters I had dug for them in the mud. Then the unfamiliar noises of the house startled me awake. The cardboard had sagged under, folded me in. To get off the couch, I planted my palms on the coffee table, which was sticky, the viscosity of maple syrup. I should have felt calmer, satisfied for this house being mine now, even proud for saving the dream frogs. I didn't. I felt helpless. I knew the dream was telling me that I couldn't stop whatever way my family would fracture. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to the department. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to my fellow readers. It's almost overwhelming to think about these two forces, Lance and Melanie, at the same time. Alone, each is a powerhouse writer and an astounding teacher, but together it's hard to overstate the positive force they've had on my writing, my own teaching and mentoring, and my life. Both have such different strengths. I learned so much about being present, paying attention, listening with radical empathy from Melanie. Melanie taught me to care much more deeply about my sentences to the great benefit of my writing. Lance taught me so much about the business of being a writer, the persistence needed, and the myriad sources of inspiration in art, history, music all around us. Lance and Melanie are a big pair of shoes to fill, but they have given us all the tools we need to grow into those shoes. And that's what makes them so singular in their own way. Their writing talent is equal to their talent for teaching, and that is so rare, I think most of us know. Thank you, Lance, and thank you, Melanie, so much for all you've done. I thought I'd use a little Melanie workshop tradition, a celebration of lines. I'm just going to read 6 of my favorite lines from Lance and Melanie's work, and then I'll read a short piece of my own. Those feet dangle among leaves so green, they writhe like flames. Tone, punishment. Her heart had already become a rain of tiny dead yellow flowers. Olsen, my red heaven. When I want to feel love, I remember the dark thrill of it, the bright sound of glass, the sudden size and weight of my own heart in my own chest, how I knew it now, how it was real to me in my body, separate from my lungs and liver and ribs, how it made the color of my blood surge against the back of my eyes, how nothing mattered anymore because I believed in this, my own heart, its will to live. Tone, Christmas, Jamaica Plain. The nightly news does not show that the only thing separating one human being from another is ruthlessly the architecture of the body. Olsen, always crashing in the same car. The Seguros watch too in the morning light. The tall ones on the ridge sense the boy and the man moving among them. Even now, tonight, the voice of the gun throbbed in their bodies. They raised their arms high and burst with white blossoms. They knew, they remembered, their long, shallow roots, heard the rabbit's heart thumping. Tone, silence and song. Art doesn't help. That's the hardest lesson you've had to learn. People insist art makes things better. You prove them wrong every day. Art doesn't make life more bearable or longer or impervious to anguish. Its real goal is the opposite, to teach you nobody can be saved in the end. Olsen, my red heaven. Thank you both so much for everything. This is untitled. We live in an old house. In a room upstairs, there is a cabinet in a corner, an old medicine cabinet. It's a small door built into the wall with a square mirror on the front that bears black smudges the way old mirrors do, those speckled fingerprints of time that look like both decay and growth. We don't keep much inside. And most of the time I open it, I see only stray Q-tips, a tub of vapor rub, and an old perfume bottle. Nothing much fits. But once in a while, when I gaze at the faded image of myself as if I'm already an old photograph, I open it up, swinging my face aside, and I see none of those things. Instead, his ghost is there. When he sees me, he pulls himself out of the wall and dusts his hands off. He's younger than he was when he died, just a child, his face as even-toned as a ripe apricot, as if I could still pull him back from his fate, though that's long past. I'm doubly helpless then as he follows me about my day, wanders around my own children, my 3 blondes, curly messes of hair like sun-filled clouds. He doesn't bother them, or me really. He mostly just watches us. We sit on the back lawn while the children play some silly game, calling out to me to watch while their 3 bodies become one pile. 3 beings that speak their own language made from 3 miscarriages, the negative film of the scene on the lawn. Some force of the heart insists they are of me, and yet their happiness is like a separate weather system, always at least one state away from mine. One mess, the boy, erupts from the pile and says, "I got my eye on you, Buster," and points his finger at me. Bang. At this, the ghost boy next to me rattles what sounds like a box of Tic Tacs in his pocket, probably the orange flavor he loved. He rattles it and meets my gaze, and in an instant I remember all the gone things as if they are here again. Sharp as they were in that first breath of lost, when it's almost as if they were not, will never be, can never be lost. The cream Angora sweater soft on my cheek, a river stone in my hand, a glass shard dripping with milk, my brother, a vellum shadow standing in our driveway. I remember my brother's body, his body. The rope burn on the side of his neck seemed like just a surface wound, one he would surely recover from. I wonder if that kind of killing is in me too, if it will grow inside my 3 wisps. What doors he opened when he closed his own. Innocence is just the most abstract form of violence. Bang, I point my finger back. Eventually, the sun crests and my brother's child image dissipates into dewdrops. The beady mist sinks to earth and then to seed, and suddenly a garden sprouts, and my children turn their cancerous sunshine to it in wonder and play gleefully, never needing to know from which dark magic, which grief it has spun. They behead tulips with their tiny fingernails, pull up thin carrots with a plink of torn roots, trample peonies. I watch them as the day slips away and the sun too slips away, and my own little clouds are dissipating. Then we go in and I give them saltines and apple juice, and someone comes home and asks about my day, and I open my mouth and then shut it, remembering as I do to slip upstairs before dinner and close the cabinet, which is still slightly ajar. With the soft click of the closed latch, the fetid mirror catches a fire in the late afternoon glare, obliterating my image like an invitation to wonder if we ever, in fact, see our faces there, or just a compilation of our memories of light. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were supposed to pay attention to the order at the beginning. I missed the assignment. I want to thank Sadie and Aaron for all of the work you put into this. And Michael, this was just such a wonderful idea. Like, what a thoughtful thing to put together, not just for Lance and Melanie, but for all of us who get to be here and share in this moment with you. So thank you so much for that. I also want to say that before coming to Utah, I was at a pretty traditional creative writing program, and I would take poetry workshops so that people would actually pay attention to my sentences. And then I'd go to my fiction workshop, and people would say, this isn't a story. And I really didn't find my voice at that program, and I was actually shocked, and everybody in that program was really shocked that I got into the University of Utah. And I was just so delighted and felt so loved here. And it was because, Lance and Melanie looked at the work that I was producing, and they actually saw potential there. They actually saw that something was happening on the page, even if I didn't quite know what it was yet. And I think that allowed me to find my voice as a writer, and so I'll be grateful forever for that. Thank you so much. I wanted to actually play a game to start off. I'm going to read a line. This might, if there's repetition, be a test of your memory. I'm going to read a line, and if my phone will cooperate. Hang on. Shoot. I'm going to read a line, and I want you to guess if it is Lance or Melanie. So should you just shout it out, or should you raise one arm if it's Lance and raise two arms if it's Melanie? What's that? Qualtrics survey. All right, you do what you decide to do. People don't take trips. Trips take people. It is the broken heart that makes us human in the end. Yeah. Your last awareness is of the sounds of the world starting to go on without you, and loneliness in its purest form. Fooled you, that was Lance. And you know what? It shows that they actually really informed each other in some ways, because this is from a later piece of Lance's. Imagine a song too sweet, vibrations of a black hole whirling in space, shredding stars that come too close, humming through time, swallowing light, swallowing color, tuned to B flat, 57 octaves too low for any human being to hear it. Melanie! All right, well, thank you all for participating. I'm going to read from this book, That Woman Could Be You, and it's a memoir that I wrote with my partner, who's here with us tonight. And we were really kind of just writing the banal, everyday stuff. And so it's a memoir that's just about everyday living, kind of going to the grocery store, the newness of our relationship. I was grieving at the time. V was having chronic pain, but it was not about meditating on those things. It's just about living every day with them. And this one is at a reading that V gave, and I saw this man at the reading who was really in love with V, so in love with her that he followed her around the country all the time. And I saw him at this reading, and I had feelings about it. But they're not the feelings I expected to have. In Philadelphia, under the string of lights in the canopy, I saw Calvino sitting so stolid in the back row. Your posture possessed a tidiness, an elegance that is what Mark Antony called bestilling. Your shoulder angled over your lap, and your arm crossed your chest, your wrist balanced on your knee, your face in profile looked intense. I felt the agony of Calvino's longing, witness to a distance he could not cross. In his place, I would not have come. I thought he is a masochist or a romantic. I watched his back recede up the sidewalk. He wore a blue-collared shirt. The outline of his hair was luminous under the light, and his face was tan and almost golden. I watched him leave, and I marveled at this, to come all the way to see you read and leave without saying hello. I touched your arm, I said, V. And you turned and called his name up the street, and he stopped, and my breath stilled when he looked back because of that kind of longing. It makes someone hallucinate. And to turn is to compress a decade of daydreams into an instant, which is always too quick. And so he has stolen, preparing himself to say goodbye before he's even said hello, which is perhaps exactly what he's unwittingly practiced in all those daydreams and hallucinations. And so it made sense what he did. He waved and walked away. I thought he looked sad. Because of this, I waved at him when his car pulled up alongside our Uber. You called out the open window, "Calvino, how are you?" And he answered, "I'm breathing." "Calvino," you called, and your smile was achingly beautiful, and I thought his face looked pained. Thank you.
So it's so good to be here. I'm going to echo Jess, actually. It's really emotional to be back and to be surrounded by people that were so formative. I think my story is that when I was accepted into the program, I came to visit, and I got to take, or I sat in on a class with Michael, I sat in a class with Melanie. Lance, you weren't here, you were traveling. But I sat in on a class with Melanie, and it was, that night I said, this is it, this is the place for me. And then I had to go to the airport the next day, and Jess packed me a lunch and dropped me off at the airport. So I heard you didn't get to eat yesterday. And I said, this is it. This is the place for me. I'm going to start with a passage from Melanie's book, The Bodies of Birds. There are 1 billion cells in the heart, 30 billion ion channels. Every moment of her beautiful life, each one has worked perfectly. We feel again the crack of the gun, but look, she's not falling. She's unfolding, rising up from the floor, and the bullet leaves her throat and returns to the pistol. The video whirls in reverse, and my brother slips the gun in his pocket. And the girl, my God, this time he sees her, pale skin and teeth so perfect. She's not afraid. She's almost smiling, and he's not going to do this thing. No, he's winding backward down the aisles, unwalking a bright labyrinth, stepping lightly into fog where the cloud of fog receives him. And that, I actually went searching for this because, Melanie, you're in a new anthology called How to Write Stunning Sentences, and the editor asked you for your favorite sentence, which was not this one, but I spent a lot of time with that. And Lance, I feel like I'm reading this, but these are actually your words, and I'm projecting them back to you. Okay, Andy and I are wired to be existentially fidgety. We moved from Iowa, where we met, to Virginia, Virginia to Kentucky, Kentucky to northern Idaho, where we lived in a cabin on a rolling countryside 40 minutes from a sweet small town, Moscow, where I taught. 11 years later, I quit my job there, assuming I'd left the academic net of disappointments and conservative bureaucracies for good. And we moved to a log home among the remote mountains and glacier lakes of central Idaho. The nearest town is 12 miles away, boasts 497 people when everyone's home, which often puts me in the mind of the cramped, shabby hut Wittgenstein built in 1914 in the isolated Norwegian mountains, his plan being to walk, read, think, write. 6 years later, the University of Utah approached me in the guise of Karen Brennan as Andy and I sat over lattes at a hotel cafe at a conference in Austin. She asked if I'd be interested in a position there. How could I hesitate? In his novel, Nietzsche's Kisses, O writes these sentences, pretending they're fiction. How, in the course of this life, did he arrive here? At one time, there seemed to have been so many other places to go. And again, I'm echoing Jess because I gave a reading just a couple weekends ago, and it did not go over. There was an open mic afterward, and everybody that was there was just there to get on that open mic and sing their songs. And afterward, I read this thing, and afterward, the host was like, "Thank you for your story." All right. And then I thought, is there an ideal audience for what I read? Because that wasn't it, And I thought, it's Utah. It's at Utah. So it's just two short sections. One, concerning the story of Beauty and the Beast and the Queen and me. Once upon a very particular period in history, during the Age of Reason and the reign of King Louis the Beloved, which is to say, before the French Revolution, there lived a merchant's daughter whose fate was to marry a prince who had been transformed into a monster. You may already know this story, or some version of it, but what you might not know is that thanks to the enduring fairy magic that has long hidden their country castle from human eyes, they are both still well and alive today. It turns out, too, that the prince's mother, the queen, is also alive and enjoys great health herself. On the morning our story begins, however, she's been unusually quiet, for she has been up all night thinking that her family's history ought to be written and preserved so that it might be handed down to all posterity. As she says this to her son and daughter-in-law, they are enjoying a hearty vegetarian breakfast. That they are vegetarians should surprise no one familiar with the prince's transformations. In fact, when asked if he has any dietary restrictions, he says, "Yes, I'm an Ovidian," has a good chuckle, and then adds, for Beauty's sake, sorry, because she's heard this joke at least 100 times. "I think it's a great idea," Beauty says. For the past month, she's been waiting for her mother-in-law to have and give voice to this very notion. By now, Beauty has spent nearly 2 centuries, total hours tallied, curled on a velvet divan beneath a tall stained-glass window, reading her way through the endless shelves of books in the castle's great library. This library, it should be noted, is home to every book that has ever been written and every book that is yet to be written. So when the Queen declares their story should be recorded for posterity, Beauty has already read it, has read dozens of Arne Thompson-Uther Type 425C stories and novels, not to mention hundreds of ATU Type 402 and 425A Animal Bride and Animal Bridegroom variants. And so she sends it once for me, the author. Well, not exactly the author, because there are too many to count, but suffice to say that I am the author of Beauty's favorite version, which I will soon find out is to be an updated retelling of my favorite version, Madame Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve's The Story of Beauty and the Beast, which was published in 1740. 2, in which I climb onto Beauty's magic horse and bring my little dog to. Luckily for me, I'm home when summoned. It's early July, and I've finally begun to settle into what feels like the actual start of an actual summer break, for I am now officially off contract and for the most part free of administrative responsibilities for the month of July. Maybe I should be relaxing after what has been a truly hellish spring semester, but my tenure clock is ticking, and my only finished manuscript keeps proving unpublishable, at least during these first 3 years of my employment anyway. And so I'm feeling intensely the pressure of having only this month to make significant progress on a new manuscript. Beneath my chair, my little dog, Clover, starts barking with her whole body toward the small forest that marks the perimeter of my apartment complex. I figure she's barking at a deer or maybe wild turkeys, but when a magnificent white horse emerges from the tree line, Clover backs up and cowers, and I hold my breath as the horse approaches, its head lowering with each step closer until we're eye to eye. Wrapped around the brow band of his golden bridle is a small paper scroll with my name calligraphed on the outside, and it unleashes the scent of jasmine as I unravel it. I don't have to read it. I don't have to read it at all. I know enough of heroes' journeys and fairy tales and magic scrolls to know there's only one response, and I'm not above admitting to having the thought that if I never come back, I'll be free of administration forever. I pick up Clover, situate her in a fur-lined saddlebag, which she snuggles into, and I climb onto the saddle. Just as in Villeneuve's tale, it doesn't feel like the horse's hooves are even touching the ground. The sensation is more like he's flying, not a jolting, bumpy ride, but a soft and soothing, swift one. And I'm more relaxed than I've been all year. I can actually feel all my fears floating away, like ribbons rippling off me and fluttering out of sight. Thank you.
In 2014, an interviewer of a very small literary journal asked me what I was reading, and I found a way to include in my answer, I would walk to Utah to study with Lance Olsen, and I would have. This is from his most recent David Bowie book. That's why this project will be a love song, not so much to him as to the lacunae around the thought of him. The idea of Sacksteder as a marker for moving through the world. Directions for a kind of life dance, let's call it, because that's what's left us when everything is said and done. These are excerpts from an essay called Last Map. The drawings you're going to see are by my sister, Amy. Where I dream about when I dream about mountains is Utah and Georgia. You, Georgia, Iceland. We both dreamed a bear ranging the forested slope out the window above the old house's kitchen table. But when I look at your glaciers, it's my mountains I must map back. When I pour into the crucible of me what was drawn from the crucible of you. This is sibling, spectacle. Oh God, I should say I'm ending with Melanie's. I didn't skip Melanie, I promise. Over the years, I've come to realize that I've never seen Georgia. Not really. That it was dreamt for us by mothers endemic to the land. Utah, a holy, secular, this is the place that awaited my invention. Iceland, time and space will tell. Sister, your map precedes my Iceland. In my dreams of Salt Lake, it's always the western part of the city I'm drawn to. I drive up hills so steep my car threatens to flip backward, or I traverse red rock arches the length of the Skyway, tour sepulchral rentals stilted on mountain sides, or finally visit the needle-peaked park my dream has raised in the valley. But it was the other side of the city I loved, the shoulder of mountains into which my life was tucked, the Avs and the U. Not the stinking lake, the fading of the grid, the Wasatch's drabber reflections, the ochre mountains. For you, the city is the West, you, sister, reason from another dream. So it makes sense that your dreams are nesting one West within another. We laid a map of our country down on a larger map of the city, the Wasatch tracing the Atlantic coast, its older cities and endowed colleges, the Ochre Mountains, the Pacific coast, and its many uncertainties. You drew a star, wrote SLC of SLC on the map. I-80 wanted to take me to the airport like it always had, further onto the salt flats as it somehow never had. The prow of Kennecott Garfield smelter likewise pointed our ship onward, but we'd nearly reached the coordinates plugged into your phone. We left the car on the side of the road and waded through the sage and dry grasses of the utter non-sight that was our destination. Look, you held up a golf ball, and suddenly we saw the senseless waves of land from the view of a plane landing overhead. We're almost there, you said, looking at your phone, and we stepped into a sand trap of the abandoned Wing Point golf course. I stopped you and pointed to another sand trap, across what my dream told me had once been the 45th hole, traced two hazards like a funnel in a southerly direction toward the fairway. The sand trap was sunken, but it still felt like down that we stepped, crossing the valley to the SLC of SLC of SLC. Here, you pushed your hand through the grass, passed where the ground should have stopped you, pulled nothing out of the hole. That's because I don't dream about Utah, you said, like you don't dream about Iceland. In tandem, we turned and traced a line that sliced through the mountains, took no road, all the way to LJ, Georgia. You dropped the golf ball, but no one clapped, if indeed it found the hole. Day one's toughest hike in the park behind me. As per other customs, my gut questioning a dinner of boiled water poured into a bag poured down my throat. Fire and beer and a book so bad that reading it drunk still counts. Smoke following me around the fire, a mental note to just buy one of those camp chairs already. Peanut shells fluttering like stunned moths into the embers. Then, above the crackle of the fire and chatter from neighboring sites, this month's song. I'd howled it that very morning through lunar Utah, south from Salt Lake, and I had to ask my own head if it was responsible. No, idiot wind, actual sound waves, idiot. An alignment so ordaining that I'd talk to the two women a few sites down the next day, let them feed me pasta and worry. Yes, all by myself. Camp food, the dehydrated kind. The song, the herald of the next celestial arrival. Giant prism, quadrilateral of pure light, opening in the night sky, spidering the red rock walls, looming glaucous over the valley. Going to investigate, I didn't know if my glass of bourbon was welcome, left it in the grass by the light post. The film was about the wildlife and petroglyphs that could be found in Capitol Reef, its status as an international dark sky park. But it could have been about stucco or the Ronettes. Back home, my custom was to work until 10 every night, a movie or show telling my body it's allowed to stop. I fetched my bourbon from the grass because no world that lets me watch TV with people I didn't have to talk to while camping in the desert would begrudge me a drink. The park was named after the geologic wrinkle that had killed so many settlers by blocking their destinies west. I thought about the word reef for the first time since the Big Five had added this park to my list, and the whole canyon was plunged underwater and drained just as quickly, leaving me gasping. The screen that mapped the constellations went black, and with it every city on the planet. Slowly, the ancient screen emerged all around, awed itself over whatever myths we might chisel on rock or celluloid or the stars themselves. We got out telescopes so we could see ourselves made smaller. In the desert, for once, with people. Kodachrome Basin State Park, a pre-dinner ramble around phallic hoodoos, stay-on-trail signage more insistent than usual. Michigan was riotous green, the slow-motion murder of every plant trying to outshade its neighbors. But in the West, it was all very curated. One plant here, then a lot of nothing before another plant had kept itself alive. That nothing, however, not so nothing, hid in life. I stooped to examine its folds and florets, ridges and gullies and grooves. It was like the whole Southwest in miniature, Zion Canyon over there, and here's Monument Valley, Escalante just having escaped the tread of that Columbia boot. Without the signs, I would not have hesitated to destroy all this. I shrank myself to gape at the heights and torquing disorder of its dream topography. I think the planet is tough, Mom used to say when we would voice concerns. It's arrogant to think we could do anything to it. When Andre Breton described the ultra-sensitive parts of the earth in Mad Love, he did not mean it like this, but that's what I've done with it. Soil that is alive in a way we don't tend to understand it, especially not here. Soil that has made itself as close to dead as possible in order to survive until the next rain. Soap showed Francis Ponge a magnificent way of living, and this cryptic life, too, will await water's activation forever. I think of words on the pages of books on a high shelf waiting for light and eyes, anachroresis, anachronism, anarchy. Perhaps it's being here for once with friends, but I think of my years painting houses and adjuncting heavy loads, falling into a novel or studying for exams. You'd not have thought I'd have fogged a mirror. Even now I can subsist on nearly nothing, focused solely on readiness for rain, be it man, woman, God, melody, idea, myself, or a land. Put me in the desert, and you'll see that it's not the trail on which I grow. Melanie took my two most feared dynamics in life, human love and religious experience, and with care and brilliance, refashioned them near approachable. More than that, of course, always. This is from Melanie's The Heart Breaks and Breaks Open. Our memories are shifting collages, narratives spun from fragments, a ceaseless flow of images and associations, an explosion of sensory impressions, a web so splendidly complicated, we have no hope of translating human experience into language. Yet we persist in doing so. Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I want to thank Sadie and Aaron for putting this event together. I'd also like to thank Michael and everyone else in the creative writing program and English department for inviting me. This is a thrill to be back, to see so many people who I recognize and who have meant a lot to me, both personally and professionally. And it's also great to see so many new faces here as well. But more than anything, I'd like to thank Melanie and Lance for, I guess, everything. Thank you for the teachers that you are, the writers that you are, and I guess mostly the people that you are. So what I think I'm going to do, I've got a little bit of a project that I've been working on that I'm going to read, but I'm going to explain why I'm reading this particular one. So I've recently been thinking about some of the works of Melanie's and Lance's that I've read and that have been most, I guess, enjoyable and maybe resonant for me. And I think of a work like Silence and Song and Skin Elegies, which I think harmonize in really interesting ways. Because on the one hand, with Lance's book, like so many of his books, we see this simultaneously gorgeous and horrific picture of history that is comprised of many forces that seek to deprive us of our own humanity. And in Melanie's work, I so often see stories, themes, and narratives that are about the many organic and inorganic systems involved in this thing we call Earth, of which humans are only a small part. And my hope is that what I'm about to read can either harmonize with those themes and ideas or at the very least create compelling dissonance with them. So this is from a novel I've been working on. The novel doesn't have a title yet, but this section does. It's called Pixel Silence, Part 1. With you, he said, it is like inhabiting a white square, a place that appears empty but is actually full, absolutely full with everything. This fullness in which all things combine and become total, that's what it's like. She replied, with you, it is a different life. It is the first life. Borges once imagined a character called Funes whose memory is total and unassailable. It is a perfect map of the entire universe, reflecting all things at all points with fidelity in the absolute. One might say that Funes' recollections are the surface of an unexplorable sea, which reflect the depths of an unexplorable space-time. Funes, the great digester. He said to her, I have lost track of the number of days that I have sought you to build and wreck the city of our habitation. We live in the same city. She replied, on some mornings when I would wake before you, when the sunlight entered through the curtains and fell on your sleeping form, I did not remember who you are. You wake, and I fear that I have forgotten something crucial. And here you are again, freshly risen from the sea. I cannot be sure that it is your hand in mine. I recall him, though I have no right to speak that sacred verb, only one man on earth did, and that man is dead, holding a dark passion flower in his hand, seeing it as it had never been seen, even had it been stared at from the first light of dawn till the last light of evening for an entire lifetime. Borges, of course, went blind. He said to her, after the onset of this silence, I sought you in the information that you have shed. I watched footage of you. I touched the belongings which you have abandoned. Why did you come to this island? She replied, I watched you appear from the sea. Water fell from you and sparked in the fresh daylight. Out of these refractions, I thought about the ends of severed cables, the exposed tips of our old infrastructures. The light that traveled through those cables, it was the information that gave form to life. It was life itself. If we opened people up, we'd find landscapes, said Agnes Varda. The problem is that to conceptualize a landscape, one must already possess a knowledge of that landscape. Any division of the earth is a folk division based on a tradition of marks and signs, in other words, a linguistic tradition. The tiger does not know that it is a tiger, and therefore it does not know that it inhabits a jungle, nor of its status as an apex predator. Its existence is undivided in the manner of a Greek hero or of a couple totally consumed by their love. Hearing your loved one's voice is not to awaken to a new day. It is to be unearthed, completely unearthed, as if after centuries. The bodies at Pompeii, the voids cast in plaster. He said to her, silence is a deep space through which sound must inevitably make its way. It is the act of resonating movement that reveals the dimensions of any space. This is a basic premise of relativity, the principle that light is space. Ours is a harmonic universe. In this silence, space itself is new. She replied, pointing to the mainland, distant and hazed by the evaporations of the sea. We can only view the surface of anything. Everything we touch is the thinnest interface. The only thing that lovers want to find is a suitable ending for their love, an ending of pathos where their affections are a consolation against all possible evils. Ingrid Bergman once cried in front of a woman and man embraced as they were when death surprised them centuries ago. Rossellini could not get her to stop crying, such was her dismay, so he filmed her. Such a decision is informative in that it indicates a split in the possibility of a person's method of remaining after their death. There are the reproductions of excavated lovers, part plaster and part mineral, and there are the cinematic remains of Ingrid Bergman wandering the alleyways of a permanently empty city. The ultimate consolation, the purest and most natural form of pathos, is to recall something your lover said, or something they did not say, something they could never say. A different filmmaker, Michelangelo Antonioni, once introduced a separate but closely related problem. He said, "They are making all possible speculations about the disappearance of the girl. After a moment of silence, one says, maybe she simply drowned. Claudia suddenly turns to him. Simply? They all look at each other, dismayed. This is it. This dismay is the meaning of the film." Thank you.
I have to meet this Lance Olsen guy. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Michael, thanks so much for putting this together. It's like so beautiful. Thank you too for your friendship. It's been great. Jess, Eric, Molly, Robert, Sadie, Joe, it's beyond wonderful listening to you all tonight and just like being here tonight. I was so tempted to do a group hug thing with like everybody in the auditorium. That would have been my reading. And then I realized many of you haven't seen the last episode of Mary Tyler Moore, and it means something completely different. So anyway, thanks so much for this. It's really, really special. You know, when I arrived for my on-campus interview back in 2007, I had lots of fun getting to know the faculty and doing my reading, doing the Q&A afterwards, and all of that sort of stuff. But the thing that really clinched the deal for me happened on the last afternoon of my visit, when a handful of grad students collected me for coffee at the Salt Lake Roasting Company. And I had a chance to experience their remarkable intelligence, energy, good-spiritedness, sort of critico-creative imaginations firsthand. And I knew immediately, oh, well, this is, you know, exactly where I wanted to be, where I needed to be. And it's been various kinds of awesome ever since. And you, my colleagues, I see you spread out around there. What a treat just to get to hang around your brains for, 16 years. Thank you, thank you. And Melanie, how perfect is it that we get to read together this evening? You once told Andy and me this story, which you don't want me to share with anyone, about when you used to fall asleep as a child. Your mother's last words to you every evening were, "Fill the room with love." And that's what you've been doing for the rest of your life. It's great. So, keeping it together, I'm going to move on and read two short pieces. The first is an excerpt from my next novel, which is called Absolute Away. It's out from Dzanc in April, I think. One day, when 67 years old, Edward blinked and was 72, rummaging through his kitchen cabinets and drawers, trying to recall why he was doing what he was doing. All he knew was the movements his body was making were both alarming and merry, as if he were a teenager doing something forbidden and delicious on a weekend night. When he couldn't find what he was looking for, he moved down the hall to the bedroom. Whatever it was, wasn't in the dresser. It wouldn't be beneath his pillows either. About this he was confident. The closet held promise. So he slid back the accordion doors and commenced sorting through raincoat, parka, peacoat, button-down shirts, and chinos from somebody else's life. Behind all of it stood a little girl in a sailor suit without cap. Where her face should have been, there was only flesh, with a small lump sans nostrils for a nose and a squirming area of agitated skin for a mouth. The girl was bald. She lacked ears. Edward wasn't even clear why he assumed she was a girl. When she became aware of his presence, she turned away, scrambling without a sound for a corner in which to hide. Edward couldn't tell the difference between the back of her head and the front. Her shoulder sockets unhinged and relocated. It seemed she was facing him and trying to hide simultaneously. Poor thing, Edward said, letting his clothes fall back into place. I've fed you long enough. He closed the accordion doors and walked out of the room. So, he said, moving up the hallway, that's where I left my future. And I want to conclude with a short poem by a fantastic unsung poet named Jason Schinder, and is titled The Party. And it goes like this. And that's how it is. Everyone standing up from the big silence of the table with their glasses of certainty and plates of forgiveness, and walking into the purple kitchen, everyone leaning away from the gas stove Marie blows on at the very edge of the breaking blue-orange lunging forward flames to warm another pot of coffee, while the dishes pile up in the sink, perfect as a pyramid. Ah, says Donna, closing her eyes and leaning on Nick's shoulders as he drives the soft blade of the knife through the glittering dark of the leftover chocolate birthday cake. That's it. That's how it is. Everyone standing around as if just out of the pool, drying off, standing around. That's it. Standing, talking, shuffling back and forth on the deck of the present before the boat slowly pulls away into the future. Because it hurts to say goodbye, to pull your body out of the warm water, to step out of the pocket of safety, clinging to what you knew or what you thought you knew about yourself and others. That's how it is. That's it. Throwing your jacket over your shoulders like a towel and saying, goodbye, Victoria. Goodbye, Sophie. Goodbye, Lily. Goodbye, sweetie. Take care. Be well. Hang in there. See you soon. Thanks.
Hi. Wow, it's great to look out from this position. People who were in my workshops may remember we closed each conversation with a celebration of lines. Everyone would read a stunning line or two from the work so the writer could hear a celebration and rearrangement of the piece through the lines others found most potent. In that spirit, I've taken lines from the works of 15 people, the former students who have read tonight, Jess, Molly, Joe, Robert, Eric, Sadie, the creative writers I work beside during my time here, Lindsay, Paisley, Kate, Jackie, Lance, Michael, and Craig, and 2 literature colleagues who have been kind enough to share their work with me through the years, Scott Black and Catherine Stockton. I've made a poem for you, and by extension, for and by all our beloved students and colleagues, past and present, and for the amazing staff people who make everything we do possible. So for you, all of you, thank you. Being human is difficult. Here is some evidence. My parents died. I never saw their bodies. I was too young. What if there is no corpse? How does one mourn without the corpse? My aunt raised me. She loved a hard rainstorm. If only I could articulate what it's like to live with someone dead, but not dead. The big rains come. The ants go underground. Then one day I see a fawn outside the window. My plan is to strangle her. There's no telling who is okay and who is not. Hydrangea, bougainvillea, stargazer lily. I am working in a hospital. I cross-reference flowers to the names of diseases. The anomalies fan out through the lining of the stomach, overflow into the small intestines, the large. Doctors come to recite their findings, foreign particulates. After my brother dies, I hear his voice at the grocery. He appears in front of me as if some kind of interference has occurred, and I can momentarily glimpse him as he will exist in the future, a future without me. There's a feeling I don't consider to be a bad feeling. What begins with confusion devolves into disorder and disarray, a further desolation, the increasing obtrusion of the word night. The sound of one animal's pain setting off a chain in so many others. Even if I were blind, I would know night by the noise it makes. I think here is not for me. Starving dogs, clouds, luminous toxins. It's like this: pigs and sick cows, vultures, a flock of geese. We pain you. Waiting for sediment to turn to stone, stone to sand, and again, and again. Through the one tiny window of a cottage with no doors, I see my father lying on a narrow bed, a white handkerchief covering his face. I knock on the glass. He lifts the cloth and smiles, disappearing all the more. I gesture, "Come along," but he waves as if to say, "You go ahead." So I do, and again, and again. A forest clearing, an overflow of stones, a cloudless sky, the forest one unbroken spell of green. God, I now believe, is the word for the space between us and every being we encounter. Look to your right or left. Mark the space between you and the person next to you. Blow a kiss into the space. Think of it as God. Mother is ill, is gone. I will never see her body. There is that. But there is also the fact of the rainfall and the soil and the seeds, cherry blossoms and the radiance of mold spores, the collision of the Milky Way with Andromeda, and condors close to extinction, evolving fast enough to reproduce without mates. I am alive. I am alive. I am alive. My God, this world, I am on it. I am in it.
Just because the ending is always awkward, that's the end. So just again, so many thanks to Lance and Melanie for being yourselves, for all that you've done for us. Thanks to Robert and to Sadie and to Molly and to Jess and to Eric and to Joe. Thank you, all of you, for being here tonight. There's one last gift that is forthcoming. There a near future episode of Western Humanities Review is going to feature the work of all the readers here tonight, as well as many more of your students. And so just keep an eye out for that. I just wanted to let you know that that's forthcoming. So again, thanks so much, everybody, and buy books.